Welcome to the Innovative Leader Podcast, featuring Christy Geiger, Executive Coach with Synergy Strategies, and David Phillips, Professor, Consultant, and Coach.
Hey, welcome to this week's edition of the Innovative Leader, where we are here to encourage leaders to equip, transform, and inspire you in what you're doing every day in your life and work. I'm here with David Phillips. This is Christy Geiger, and we would like to talk. We're sitting here at the end of June or the beginning of July, and we'd like to talk today a little bit about the uncertainty that's going on right now, and how when there is so much ongoing uncertainty, which has been something we've been talking about really in 2020 since March, and the uncertainty that started with COVID. But really now we're kind of in a season of perpetual uncertainty where we think that we find a new norm, we think we find a new rhythm, and then the game keeps changing and new challenges or conflicts begin to arise. And so leading through this perpetual uncertainty can be very challenging. And what we've noticed is there's a way that people show up when they are continually oppressed by uncertainty. And the way that they show up kind of activates what we believe is really the survival brain. Mm-hmm. And when we have this survival brain, it changes the way that we operate and therefore creates more conflict in teams. In addition to the uncertainty, now people seem to struggle with each other in a new way when it's a time when we really need to be working together. And as a leader, how do you navigate that? It can be really challenging. So, David, what do you make of why, what's happening with this survival mode? What does that mean? How does it show up? How can we recognize that in ourselves and in others?
So, uncertainty will create within us a high level of stress. There were several studies done recently that one gave you three options. They played this game. It was this really cool game, and the first you had three choices. You had to pick up a rock, and under that rock could be a snake or not, and which seems really not too fun. But so there were three choices in this, and one is to they announced we're not going to give you a shock. The second one was we are going to give you a shock, an electric shock, and the third was you might get an electric shock. And what they found was the might raise stress levels extremely high, and that level of uncertainty created a high level of stress within the person playing the game. And so what that tells us is when there's a high level of uncertainty, there's a high level of stress, and stress plays out within people's lives in so many different ways. From there's all kinds of emotional things that come along with that. You can in action, you can do emotional eating, you can do all kinds of things. You get tired, you get stressful. Your ability to learn is reduced. Your ability to assess mental risks goes down, and there's all kinds of things physiologically that are affected when that happens. And so when we get in that survival mode, we really kind of strive to engage our control mechanisms, whatever they are. If you are someone who craves high level of control, and you like to command the situation, that's where you're going to go. If you control by shutting down, that's where you're going to go. So you start to see people begin to react in different ways based on the increased level of stress in their lives. And that creates a lot of tension within a team, because people they don't act together as one. They try to control that uncertainty so that they can have some level of certainty because our brain actually craves certainty. And so you have to be aware of those things. You have to look for those things to see how as a leader, how people have changed when survival mode hits. And you just have to be, it's an awareness thing. In a relational awareness thing, knowing your people and knowing how they react when stress hits, when that uncertainty hits. How about you?
Yeah. No, it brings up so many different thoughts. I agree. I think when we move into that place of control, and I think that's a very good word for it, right? That humanly, what we're trying to do is to control something because there's so many things that we can't control.
Right.
We're trying to find something that we can control because ultimately it calms our brain down, it calms that limbic system down, and we feel greater peace. We feel like, okay, I don't know what's happening with all of those things, but at least with this is what I'm going to do. So I think that just to be mindful of that, if we're looking like, do I feel like I'm in a power struggle with someone? Do I notice that I'm kind of fighting for control with my team or fighting for control on decision makings, or we're getting off agenda and it feels like there's constantly a bit of a tug of war? Those tend to be control type symptoms.
Yep.
And that they're not coming from a bad place, because a lot of times we get frustrated when we're trying to gain some level of common certainty and a foundation, and you're trying to gain a foundation, and then you're pushing your way, I'm pushing my way. All of a sudden we become each other's enemy because your efforts are sabotaging my ability to get certainty and to get a foundation.
Exactly.
And so then all of a sudden we become enemies with one another, and we become frustrated with one another because what we're doing with each other is we're just desperately trying to get a baseline for ourselves.
Yep.
And as everybody does that for themselves, because we live in this beautiful, amazing canvas of different people, colors, shapes, everything. Yep. We're all so different that the way we handle stress is different. The way that we handle creating a foundation and certainty is different. And so as we try to create that, all of a sudden we start to have more conflict.
And I was going to say that really arises, COVID right now is as you were talking about in the opening is huge. Texas is opened up. Now it's shutting down. Florida opened up. Now they've had the most cases. I think that was even today, the most cases they've ever had in one day. Today, there's Universal Studios and Disney. Universal Studios is open. Disney is scheduled to open next month. There's a lot of uncertainty over jobs, over incomes, over being able to pay the rent, those kinds of things. And so COVID has created this, and when that, we think it's stress, but it really is uncertainty. That we just don't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know what we're going to do. And all those terms lead to stress, but that underlying issue is that uncertainty.
Yeah, good. So really then let's shift to how should leaders respond? Because on one hand, a leader can feel very helpless and vulnerable to this situation where they're like, well, we were going to open up, but now this is happening. I was going to do this, but now this is happening. So a leader can be very much caught in this same vortex where they're trying to make decisions, but decision making is hard. It's slow. And leaders, you guys have greater stress and pressure on you. So with that volume of stress and pressure, let's talk a little bit about how can a leader respond? Because it's not about it's not about fixing the problem.
Right.
And it's not about making certainty where certainty just isn't. So what are your thoughts about how to navigate that? How do you lead well?
Yeah. So, one of the things you have to do is you have to empathize with people. It's easy to go off, but the emotionally mature response is to empathize, to understand that everybody is going through this level of uncertainty, and not everybody has been on the same journey. And so your role really becomes a coach. Here, understand what's going on, and then try to help them understand some of what's going on as well. The compassion that, as we talked a little bit earlier, the compassion that is needed, the emotional intelligence to understand what's going on in others is huge. You just have to begin to look at things. You have to relate to them. You have to contextualize what they're going through, and then be able to respond out of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How about you? What's your thoughts on that?
What you said with the emotional intelligence, I think that points to the series that we just have come out of with the Healthy Mind Platter, and
Right.
how important it is for leaders, in order to be in that emotionally intelligent space, to practice all of the principles of the Healthy Mind Platter. And so often they seem removed in a time of this uncertainty and unknown. We feel like we don't have time for that.
Yep.
But you don't have time not to do those things, because if you don't do those things, it is more difficult for your brain to actually be in your frontal lobe, and you are more likely to get also limbically hijacked. So in order to have that empathy and the compassion, it's really important that you're starting your day in a very mindful, centered, balanced kind of a place. It really reminds me, recently I've reconnected with the Positive Intelligence book by Shirzad Chamine. And I love it because that one talks, in the book, he talks about our saboteurs, which really, in my words, is the overuse of our strengths. And so we all have natural strengths, which very much can be a go-to in times of uncertainty. But when there is so much uncertainty and instability, we can hyperinflate those strengths, and then they kind of become the saboteurs, because the saboteurs are essentially a way that we're trying to control ourselves and others. And so what Shirzad talks about in the book that's really great is he really maps out the sage powers. And the sage powers are, how do we all be sage? And as leaders, we need to be sage leaders. And the 5 steps in sage leadership is to empathize, exactly what you were saying, to understand, hey, this is really tough. I know there's a lot of uncertainty. How are you doing? What do you need? You're empathizing where that person is at. And then there's more steps around exploring and innovating and navigating. But essentially, it's just really about this mindful, centered way of showing up, rather than needing to fix the problem, needing to create a fire drill, needing to control. We want to go to those types of actions, but really we have to show up as the most heart-centered leader that we have ever shown up as, that just has compassion and that is willing to explore and be like, well, what do you need? What's another way to say things?
Right.
Say that. What do we need to let go of? What do we need to surrender right now?
Right.
Let's figure this out together. Let's co-create, because the way we did it isn't working. So this is really important to this person, and this is really important to you. So how can we do that together? Because this gives that person stability and this gives you stability. So let's co-create. Let's figure out what that looks like together. And like you said about being a coach, I think leaders really have to transform into the coach, instead of being that driving leader, instead of being, follow me, here we go. That activates all of this control stuff, because they know that there's uncertainty ahead. So you have to stop and just circle the wagons and be like, yeah, this is tough. Okay, so what do we all need to navigate forward?
Yep.
And to be present with your team. It's a different way of leading than we typically think about leadership.
Absolutely. I like the word you mentioned, surrender there. The hardest thing to do in a level of when you're living through uncertainty is to let go. But you also have to understand that you can't control everything. You have to let go of the things that you can't control. you can't control when Disney World opens back up. You can't control when restaurants open back up. You can't control. There's so many things that you cannot control in your life, and you have to let go of the need to control. Now, that's easier said than done, right? I almost think that the only way you can do that is to be put in a situation where you have no control, and you literally have to let go of everything. And but once you do that, then I think that stress, I think that you begin to embrace uncertainty, and you can live and manage within uncertainty. You talked about reframing, and I like that word as well, because one of the things that we also know from research is that the highest levels of stress create high levels of concentration, and you tend to succeed and you tend to try harder when you are stressed. And so there's almost this correlation between between stress and success, that you need stress to create success and to be creative. And so if you can reframe these scenarios, these situations that we live in, and these time that we live in, and instead of seeing it as a complete level of complete lack of control, but an opportunity to reframe the conversation to being creative and being innovative, then that gets most of our juices going. It allows us to focus on something besides the uncertainty, and it allows us to focus on something we can control, which is our creativity and our innovation. And so it's a transition of that control from needing to hold on tight to let's do what we can do. Let's control what we can control, which is to find a solution to this, to find an answer to a bigger problem other than just COVID in this particular instance. How can we be creative in, I think of all the restaurants that have the ways they have been creative in still staying open and getting meals to people, the way that companies like DoorDash and Uber and all of these companies have really transitioned themselves into delivery services, and all the creativity that has come out of this level of stress, because stress creates success and creates opportunities for success and creativity and innovation.
Agree. With that, it reminds me so much too of several things you said in there. So one, when we're in a survival mode, it really is the parallel state of a scarce mindset. And when I have a scarce mindset, I need to hold on to things because I'm afraid of losing it. So scarce means that there's not enough to go around. So you have to protect your resources. You have to not share, and you pull in. So a scarcity mindset naturally will do that because we believe that there aren't abundant solutions, and we fear that there isn't enough to go around, versus what you were talking about with surrendering. Really, the opposite of scarcity is prosperity. And prosperity is the belief that there is enough, and the belief that this is good. And so we stop and we ask the question, what is good about this? What is good about this?
Right.
And so you're not judging something as bad or as a problem per se. You're looking at what is good, what is the opportunity, rather than seeing it in that scarcity. You're looking at it in a more prosperous mind. And when we're in the prosperous mind, that goes to what you were saying about surrendering, which really ultimately is unattachment. Right. So when I have prosperity, I'm not worried. I'm not holding like, this is my last water. I'm not clinging where I have to get unattached to my water. But when I have a mindset of prosperity, I can be open in my hands and in my approach because I'm unattached. So this is where I think we're headed. But if we need to change gears, that's cool. Right. And so in the unattachment perspective, it also then lets us, instead of just focusing on letting go, When we're unattached, it allows us to go with the flow. And so when we're unattached and we're going with the flow, now this is where gifts present themselves and where innovation presents itself.
Yep.
And sometimes we try to force innovation and we work so hard to be like, oh man, how are we going to innovate this? How are we going to overcome this?
Right.
And we overthink it and we overpress it because we're controlling the solution.
Yep.
We're controlling what's happening, versus if we can take a deep breath, get into that prosperity mindset where we are unattached, we're better able to go with the flow. And then almost magically, but it's really part of the process, that these things naturally present themselves. The organic innovations where you're like, man, how did they think of that? Or wow, I wish I thought of that, is about being present. And it's about just being in the moment and being able to go with the flow will allow these things to show up, which again, it's so hard for us because our natural human nature wants to control. Yep. We want to know. And this going with the flow surrenders that control, and it surrenders knowing, and it just simply is present with people in the process. It's being in the process. And as we do that, people will calm down because you're not controlling, they're not controlling. So you're present with them, you're open, you're honest, you're looking for what's good, you have a prosperous mindset, and you're unattached, and then those solutions will present themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, so let's take a few minutes to kind of recap and see what we can take away from this. So,
Sure.
One of the things that that I found through this process, or through our discussion today, is that really uncertainty is about control. It's a control issue, and we all strive for control. But really thriving in uncertainty is as much about letting go of control as it is about trying to manage control. What else have we learned today, Christy?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I just think that the reality is it's normal. You are not bad or wrong. You're not a bad leader. Your people are not bad people because we're fighting with these themes right now. This is very normal. Given everything that's going on, this is very normal. So it's not about being unskillful. It's not about being a bad leader, missing something, but that really we just stop to be like, okay, so how is this showing up? And we stop to look for it, to recognize it. And when we see that power struggle happening, that instead of trying to assert more power, that we do move to this place of compassion and empathizing and being present and letting go, so that we can flow together with our team rather than being in this this power struggle with them.
Absolutely. And then, one more that I really like is that stress creates the opportunity for success and creativity. When we're running late, we don't stress so much. When we're running early, we don't stress so much. When we may or may not get there on time, that's when we're coming up with excuses. We're stressing about showing up on time. But it puts us in a focused place. So if you can reframe those from into channeling that to creativity and innovation, then you really have the opportunity to do some really cool things within your organization.
I think that's good. And with the stress, and again, another natural phenomena. So then what can we do, since stress is a natural phenomena and there's a gift from the stress, in order to be able to best access that? I'm going to say, go back to that healthy mind platter and just do a little inventory, and of those attributes, which ones are you doing and which one are you not? Because if you can get yourself in the healthy mind platter mode, and then you're in this, kind of hot water of stress right now, you can learn and grow and level up through the stress. But it's about that mindfulness too, so that we don't short circuit under the stress, but we actually rise up under the stress.
Absolutely. Well, I think that does it for today. So we hope you have enjoyed this podcast. Make sure you subscribe at at theinnovativeleader.co, or Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, also on YouTube. And would love to have some reviews through that. And we do answer your questions and your comments on YouTube as well. So we look forward to that. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye, Christy?
Just as leaders, maybe they have thoughts or ideas as we've been discussing today. You might have had some thoughts or ideas about the way that you're navigating it well, and things that you maybe accidentally stumbled on, or something that you read about, or a way that you have tried something with your team that is really helping right now. And if you have ideas, please share those. The best ideas come in the pool of everyone sharing resources and thoughts and experiences. So share those too.
All righty. Well, listen, it's been good to be with you today, and we'll talk again.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.